Snow drifted through the gaps in the barn roof, falling soft over the straw where a horse lay trembling. The lantern light swayed, catching the frost that clung to her coat like shards of glass. Elias Ward stood beside her, cap pulled low, his hands cracked from years of work and winters that took more than they gave. He'd found her 2 nights ago half buried in a frozen creek, a dark shape against the white. Since then, she hadn't stood once. Her breathing came ragged, each exhale thinner than the last. The vet's boots crunched on the floorboards behind him. She's too far gone, Elias. Infection's deep, lungs are giving out. Letting her go might be the kindest thing. The words fell gently, but they struck hard. Elias didn't answer. He only placed a hand on the mare's neck, feeling the faint, uneven pulse. The horse blinked slowly, eyes clouded with pain, but still aware enough to meet his gaze. He wondered if she knew he was failing her. Outside, the wind carried the sound of snow shifting off the roof. The world was muted, wrapped in the hush of a storm that refused to stop. The vet drew a small case from his coat pocket, the metal catching the dim light. Elias stepped back, jaw tight. There was mercy in what was about to happen, he knew, but mercy had always felt too much like surrender. A movement at the door broke the stillness. Small footprints in the snow, a shadow pressed against the frame. A girl, maybe 10, with tangled hair and a threadbare coat too big for her. Her boots didn't match. She stared past the men to the horse, eyes wide with a strange, quiet certainty. "She's still breathing," she said softly, as if announcing a miracle. Elias frowned. "Where are your folks, kid?" The girl didn't answer. She stepped closer, her breath visible in the cold. Around her neck hung a small locket on a frayed string. She reached out a hand but stopped short of touching the horse, whispering, "Don't be scared." The mare's ear flicked weakly, a faint sign of response that neither man could ignore. The vet sighed, lowering the syringe. "She's suffering," he murmured, but the girl shook her head. "She's waiting." Elias studied her, the way her hands trembled, but her voice did not. There was something in her tone, faith born not from knowing, but from losing. He had heard it once before, long ago, when his wife had said, "Let's try one more time before the sickness took her." The lantern flame shivered in the draft. The vet glanced at Elias for a decision. Elias looked at the girl, then at the horse's faintly rising chest. "Leave the needle," he said quietly. Outside, the snow kept falling, unbroken and endless. Inside, the barn held its breath. And for the first time in a long while, Elias didn't know if hope was foolish or necessary. By dawn, the storm had broken, leaving the barn steeped in pale, uncertain light. The girl had fallen asleep against a haystack, her knees drawn tight, the mare's shallow breathing steady beside her. Elias watched her from the doorway, his breath misting in the chill. He didn't know her name, only that she'd appeared when the world was at its most fragile, like something carried in with the wind. The vet had gone, muttering about hopeless causes, but Elias hadn't been able to send her away. Not yet. When she woke, she moved straight to the horse's side, her small hands brushing frost from the animal's mane. "She's warmer now," she murmured, as if speaking to herself. Elias knelt, feeling the mare's neck. She was, by some stubborn grace, still alive. "You can't save every creature that falls," he said quietly. The girl looked up, eyes fierce beneath tangled strands of hair. "Maybe, but I can try." He studied her more closely then, the hollow cheeks, the chapped lips, the way her voice carried both defiance and exhaustion. "You got a name?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "Nora." Nothing more. No last name, no story, only that single word spoken with the weight of someone who'd learned not to expect questions. Through the day, Nora stayed with the mare, humming a tune too soft a name. Elias fetched warm water, torn between reason and the faint stirring of something like belief. He saw the horse's trembling ease when Nora touched her, how the animal's breathing fell into rhythm with her voice. There was a steadiness in the girl's care, an instinct beyond her years. She moved slowly, without fear, as though she'd known this creature long before the barn, long before either of them had begun losing things. That night, Elias brought a blanket and a bowl of soup, setting them near the hay. She thanked him without looking away from the horse. My mama used to say every soul needs someone to stay beside it, she whispered. He nodded, unable to speak. When the wind rose again, rattling the shutters, Nora pressed closer to the mare. Elias watched from the loft, the lantern beside him flickering. The scene below seemed almost sacred. The small figure guarding the broken animal, the hush of snow pressing against the walls, the faint hum of a lullaby holding the dark at bay. Near midnight, the mare shuddered violently. Elias rushed down, thinking it was the end. But Nora only laid her palm against the horse's muzzle, whispering words too low to catch. Slowly, impossibly, the shuddering ceased. Elias stood frozen, the truth sinking in. Something had shifted. Whether mercy or miracle, he couldn't name it. The horse's breathing steadied. Nora's eyes lifted toward him, clear and certain. "See," she said. She was just waiting for someone not to give up. Elias turned away, heart unsteady, knowing he wouldn't. Not anymore. Days folded into one another, marked only by the rhythm of small mercies. Elias rose before dawn, stoked the stove, and carried warm mash to the barn where Nora was already waiting. Her hands red from the cold. The mare, Willow as Nora had named her, could stand now, though her steps were uncertain. Each breath still rasped like wind through broken reeds, but her eyes followed the girl everywhere she moved. Elias couldn't explain it, yet he stopped trying. Some things, he decided, were beyond reason. He mended the fences, replaced cracked boards, and found himself whistling again. It startled him, the sound of it after so long. Nora would look up from brushing Willow's mane and smile, shy but knowing. She rarely spoke of her past, but in fragments he pieced together what she'd lost. A mother buried one winter, a father who never came back, a long stretch of wandering that ended here, in this place that smelled of hay and smoke and second chances. At night, they ate in silence by the fire. Sometimes she'd open a locket she wore, gaze at the faded picture inside, then tuck it away without a word. Elias understood the weight of things kept close. He, too, carried ghosts that spoke louder in the quiet. One afternoon, the vet returned, surprised to find the mare standing. "I'll be damned," he said, crouching beside her. Didn't think she'd last a night. Nora's hand rested protectively on Willow's neck. "She just needed time," she said simply. The vet looked to Elias, half smiling. "Seems you've got yourself a little healer." Elias nodded, though he knew it wasn't healing so much as love, steady, undeserved, and relentless. As winter waned, warmth began to creep through the fields. Elias taught Nora how to measure feed, how to check a hoof, how to listen for trouble in the stillness. She learned quickly, her laughter breaking the silence that had settled in his home for years. In her presence, the walls seemed to breathe again. One evening, a hard wind tore through the valley, slamming doors and cutting power. The barn went dark. Willow cried out in panic, hooves striking wood. Without hesitation, Nora ran into the storm. Elias followed, heart pounding, shouting her name over the roar. He found her inside, clutching Willow's halter, whispering, "It's all right, girl, it's just noise." The horse steadied, her body trembling less. When Elias reached them, he saw how pale the child had gone, her lips blue with cold. He wrapped her in his coat and carried her back to the house, setting her near the fire. Her eyes fluttered open, faintly smiling. "She's safe," she whispered. He brushed a hand across her forehead, a prayer forming where words failed. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, the old house felt warm again. Elias realized that somehow, without his noticing, the girl had begun saving him too. By spring, the valley thawed into green. The snow receded from the hills, leaving behind soft earth and the scent of renewal. Willow grazed near the fence line, her coat smooth again, the light in her eyes no longer dimmed by pain. Nora stood beside her, sketching clumsy shapes on a scrap of paper Elias had found in the old desk. He watched from the porch, coffee cooling in his hand, and felt the strange ache of peace, something he hadn't trusted in years. The vet stopped by one morning, leaning on the fence with a smile that carried quiet disbelief. "Didn't think she'd make it," he said. "Whatever you two did worked." Nora beamed, brushing Willow's neck. We just stayed. Elias looked at her, realizing how simple and impossible that truth was. Staying had been the hardest thing after loss. Yet somehow, she'd taught him how again. Not long after, a county officer arrived in a dusty truck, hat in hand. He asked for a missing child, 10 years old, brown hair, answers to the name Nora. Elias felt her small hand tighten around his. The officer's voice softened when he saw them together. "She's been gone a while," he said quietly. "Folks have been looking." Nora lowered her gaze. "I wasn't lost," she whispered. "I just didn't belong anywhere." Elias hesitated, then stepped forward. "She's at a place here," he said. "If that counts." The officer studied them for a long moment, eyes settling on the horse, standing calm and whole between them. At last he nodded. "Maybe it does." He left without taking her, saying the papers could wait. Days stretched into summer. The ranch no longer felt empty. Elias found laughter echoing through the barn, sketches pinned to walls, small footprints in the dust. Nora helped with chores, her confidence growing like the wildflowers near the stream. Willow followed her everywhere, patient and proud. Sometimes, when the light slanted just right, Elias caught the faint reflection of his late wife's smile in the girl's quiet determination. It startled him, then comforted him. Grief, he realized, hadn't left. It had simply changed shape. One evening, as the sun bled gold over the fields, Nora rode Willow bareback for the first time. Her laughter carried across the pasture, bright and unguarded. Elias leaned against the fence, hat pressed to his chest. The wind stirred the grass, whispering like memory. For a long time he stood there, watching hope made visible in the fading light. Later, he opened his old leather journal and wrote, "Sometimes the broken find each other, and that's enough." He closed it softly, hearing Nora's laughter still echoing beyond the barn. The world, he thought, didn't always give second chances. But when it did, they looked like this: small hands, a mended horse, and a quiet home that had learned to breathe again.